So this is your space.
Yes.
Where are we geographically?
We're in Irwindale. We are maybe like 25 minutes east of Pasadena.
Okay.
Irwindale is like this, I'm not like an expert on Irwindale, but Irwindale is like a very industrial town. There's not a lot of people that live here. It's like a, yeah, there's a lot of industry here. There's like a metal supply shop down the road. There's like a lot of auto repair. There's other factories. There's like a giant beer factory. That's what I always tell people is like the kind of like, that's where you're exiting is off the 210.
The beer factory?
Beer factory.
And you were telling me there's like a bunch of old mines? Like
Yeah.
There's a bunch of big pits, holes in the ground, basically?
They used to harvest, or maybe they still do. Maybe like you like look this up and say actually you're wrong, but I think they like get limestone or some kind of gravel, dirt, mineral. They mine for it here. So if you drive, when you drive out, you'll be driving down the highway and you'll see like a giant like pit in the ground.
Yeah, I passed them. So Irwindale is like 40-ish minutes from kind of like central LA.
Yeah.
Which has pros and cons.
Yeah. Actually, I was just saying, it's like I love it out here because it's made for work. Like people that come here, so it's nice to not have to negotiate. Like I'm not like displacing anybody's home. Like like there's no like Irwindale is not gentrifying. Like like it is.
That's a great point.
and that I like one because I'm not participating in that, but two like just that. I'm here to work, and like it's also built for it. It's quiet. Like the roads are wide. Like a tractor trailer can come and back up to my shop easy. Like it's not an issue to like get things in and out.
Yeah.
I have like a ground floor space with a big roll up gate. So a parking lot. You know.
We were just saying off camera that this is super ideal.
Yeah.
You can just drive your truck right up to the door. Like you don't have to go up and down stairs. No free elevator.
Yeah, exactly.
All that stuff is frustrating. Plus you got big parking lot, free parking.
Free parking. Like this building I was saying is like, it's well maintained. Like it's professional. Like they kind of occupies like that area-ish, and I occupy kind of that area-ish, and we share all the tools. And when I moved in, I bought like half of some of the larger tools, so we co-own them.
Cool.
But then each have our own like hand tools and specialty kind of stuff, and it's good. It's a good situation. We work together sometimes. Like he'll have like, even just like casually, like I have this giant ass table that I need to get into the truck. Can you help me? Like,
Nice.
So it's just nice to have somebody here.
Second pair of hands, even.
Yeah. And just like safety standpoint too, it's nice. I like cut my finger off or something.
That's true. Do you guys like bounce ideas off each other, or do you kind of keep to yourselves creatively?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Gabe is like, I always introduce Gabe as an artist, and he's always like, no, I'm a cabinet maker. But he's an artist.
Cool.
He like studied with Vito Acconci in like Brooklyn. Like he's a painter, he's a thinker. He's like, he gives me perspective on designs and ideas that I have, not just from a technical standpoint. Like firstly from a technical standpoint, because he's like much more knowledgeable than I am. I think even from a builder standpoint, has more experience. So I'm always like, hey, how would you do this? Or does this make sense? Like how the way I'm making this. So it's nice to have that kind of conversation, but then also from like a bigger kind of intellectual, conceptual standpoint, he also brings like good feedback and like.
That's great. Yeah.
It's perfect. Like and also I feel like I'm just like blowing up Gabe. Like he deserves it. He's awesome.
Cool.
He like also is like a nice person.
Great.
Like is reliable and like will not miss rent. And
that's the kind of person you want to share a shop with.
And also be friendly. And like,
so this table here is enormous. This table saw.
Oh yeah.
How much did this thing cost?
So this table saw actually belongs to Gabe fully.
Okay.
It was here when I moved in. I think maybe I'm gonna get the story wrong, but I think in his last shopmate bought it, or no, maybe Gabe bought it. I think at like auction for like $3,000 or something, but it's actually like a $15,000 saw.
That's a pretty good deal.
But he bought it like sight unseen and was like, let's do it.
Okay.
So this thing is amazing in a lot of ways, because what it does is I don't know if you want a whole like technical
let's see
conversation,
it. Nerd out.
But it cuts this way, like this is a bed that slides, so like it's a cabinet saw. So you put a sheet of plywood on here, and you can square it up. You can cross cut, and then you can spin your plywood and put it against this fence and cut it this way. And you've got this fence here. You can like, it's got a tape measure, and then you've also got that fence. So it took me a minute to figure out how to like use it, but it's actually, once you've got it figured out, it's like an incredibly efficient and amazing saw, and you don't have to be lifting plywood over your it's amazing.
It's quite the tool.
Yeah.
And then I also think when we did the like first walkthrough, when I first came to meet you, you were telling me about your homemade like vacuum sealing table.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about that. And also I think I see what was in that table.
Oh yeah.
This has evolved a little bit. So tell us about this table.
This is a vacuum bag that is used for veneering and for doing layups. Sometimes you'll glue like plywood thicknesses together to get like an unusual thickness. Like say somebody wants their desk to be 2 1/4 inch thick. You'd put 3 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood in this bag with glue in between. You turn it on and it sucks all the air out.
Can we see the little grooves?
Yeah, it's got this like this kind of thing here that the air is pulled from this tube. That's the vacuum, and it comes up here and pulls all the air out, and it slides through all these grooves here. And we made this top, or Gabe made it, I think. Yeah, we use it for like laying up laminations. Like if you want to create like a curve like this, you've got these layers of ply. These would be thin layers of 1/8 inch ply that you would put over a form with glue in between, put it in the bag, and it would clamp it down.
Yeah. And this, I don't know if you can see this, but this goes like, what is that, like 8 feet almost maybe?
This is an 8-foot bag, 4x8. We have a 5x10 foot bag too, that if we need to do larger. And it's just set up on sawhorses right now. Ideally, it would have its own like dedicated spot, but right now it's kind of like when I need it, we set it up, or when Gabe needs it, we set it up and then tear it down.
Okay.
Because our space is decently sized, but we have there's a lot of stuff in here. So it's nice to be able to like keep things mobile, break them down.
So what was in here when I was here last was what?
Well, so I was doing some veneering of, here I'll show you a little piece of this redwood burl veneer. So it's like this kind of like funky burl veneer.
Yeah.
And
that's like,
I was
that's
working
beautiful.
on a little experimental project. I was a part of this residency through, it's not through IKEA, it's not an official residency. It was like this guerrilla residency called the IKEA residency here in Burbank, California. And essentially a bunch of artists were put together to be inspired by the space, or not be inspired by the space, and just meet people and do whatever. So there's an exhibition that's coming up. So I'm making a work that is like this burl veneer laid up on top of this dresser from IKEA. It's not done. It's not nearly. It's still kind of like I'm figuring it out. Like I'm gonna veneer into these corners. I need to like clean everything up, but I'm doing this weird cabinet that like I don't know what I'm gonna put things maybe in the drawers. I'm not sure yet.
And this was an IKEA cabinet, right?
Yeah.
Like they gave you, was their prompt, like they gave you an IKEA object to,
No,
okay.
They were just like, do nothing, do something, what are you gonna do? Like we'll pair you with another artist and you can like work collaboratively together, if that makes sense, or maybe you are just going to not work together and just like write a poem and that's it, or go have lunch one day together and that's it.
Interesting.
So what I did is I just went and I had lunch by myself one day, which was awesome.
On their dime, maybe?
No, not even.
Dang.
This is very chill. This is like not.
That's
But
cool.
I'm very thankful for it because it kind of got me. So this burl veneer is like kind of something I've been thinking about for my next collection. I learned that I don't want to work with veneer that is that has no backing. So this stuff is like straight off a tree, wood on wood. It's very difficult to work with. You can see all these cracks and whatnot. So when you get it, it's like super wavy, and because of the burl, the grain direction, it doesn't quite know where to go. so it's hard for it to relax, and like it's very difficult to work with.
Yeah,
So-
I was curious if the cracks were intentional or.
Well, I think I'm gonna fill with like more veneer. I'm gonna like veneer more. I'm gonna play with it more. I might fill with like resin, like dark, like colored, similar color resin. I'm working on this sculpture right now.
But these are the pieces that were in that vacuum table. Like you were
parts.
vacuuming
Yeah.
the veneer.
Yeah, it's got glue. You roll on glue on the part. You put the veneer on top of it. You put it in the bag. It sucks it down. It's like a clamp. And then you take it out 45 minutes later, and then you can trim and.
Cool. Okay. Cool.
But yeah, so I learned that like working with veneer that does not have. I kind of knew this, but it just kind of solidified that it's going to be a very difficult material to work with.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you real quick if you're curious. So I got this. I haven't even opened it. I'll open it for you if you want to see it.
Yeah, let's see it.
I got this redwood burl veneer that's paper backed. That's actually like really incredibly beautiful. I'm going to use it for my.
Here's some scissors that be helpful.
Thank you. I'm going to use this for my collection. I think I'll have a little more control because it's paper backed. Let's see.
I also don't want to forget, you told me about, I didn't know about like how burl is formed, so let's not forget to talk about that. That was really interesting.
I'll get into some of that stuff too.
Oh wow, that's really pretty.
So this is like laid up on paperback, so it's got a lot more strength in terms of its application. It's not cracking, it's flat. I can put it on like curved surfaces. That's pretty good. Let me move some of that stuff so it's a little pricey, is what it is. So it's also like an investment.
Yeah.
Like to buy a material that is, hurts a little bit to get, but it's kind of crucial, I think, to. I guess what I'm trying to say with this new collection, in terms of like we were saying, like conceptually, like burl, thinking about material and like the stories that I can make with the materials. Like burl is this tree that has disease or is like about to die or whatever, has some kind of like trauma, and it creates this like desperate attempt to save itself. What actually happens is it grows these giant,
almost like tumors
on the sides of themselves, and end up sometimes still dying, and it's not really, so it's kind of the result of like this like trauma or like whatever moment of like trying to save itself. So I thought that like, all right, this is oftentimes how I work when I think about like making art or making furniture. I'm like, I run into some kind of thing within the world, or whether it be like looking on the internet or talking to somebody, and I'm like, oh, that makes me like pause for a second. Like that's kind of interesting.
That's the importance of getting out in the world and doing stuff.
Yeah.
Having experiences.
Yeah. So that was kind of like an interesting moment. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like, okay. It's kind of cool how then then produces something beautiful, and this is like maybe a little cheesy, but it produces something kind of beautiful out of a moment that like what they were intending of saving themselves like didn't really quite work, but the result, what's left over, is a thing that's sought after it for its like interesting like uniqueness and beauty. So it's like, that's kind of cool.
It's also pretty, isn't it, somewhat rare?
It's a little bit rare. I mean, it's not insanely rare. Like if I want to go get burl, I can get burl.
Okay.
But it's more expensive because it's not as much of it. Redwood is also like native to this area-ish, California. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of cool to like localize.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. But yeah, the story of like the beauty from kind of like tragic destruction is an interesting one. I didn't know that before you told me.
And then I was like, I don't know if you want to hear all this, but I'll get into it because I want to show you this.
Let's do it.
I'm making.
Let's get into it.
So like the burl I started reading about like burl veneer and like Wikipedia, and like reading about how people describe it, and there was a line within the description that was like, it's the consequence of damage, and I was like, the consequence of damage, like what does that mean? So I Google that, and that leads me to like reading about like contract law and like different like damage in the sense of like in a legal like framework. So it started. I
like
started
a lawsuit?
reading. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So like the consequence of damages.
Yep.
And so I started reading about like some of the history of that and how that came to be. And one of the first sort of situations or like cases that solidified this in legal like precedents, you know, was this case where this company contracted another company to make a crankshaft for their motor that had broken, and that other company didn't come through with their crankshaft, so they weren't able to operate and lost a bunch of money because they weren't, you know, because they didn't come through. So I started thinking about, and then that is like an interesting idea that you would still be liable for, you know, your what you do or don't do has consequence. That there is like a kind of like, even if it's unintended, even if you don't know what you're doing, good or bad, sometimes the things that you do, like this burl tree, didn't know that the thing that it was doing actually potentially then is great, is good, is beautiful maybe, or whatever, you know, not good or great, but just like the outcome is unknown, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that that's interesting. So I was like, okay, crankshaft, this is like so distant like on the surface, but how can I like, maybe I can like bring in other objects and symbolism that like point and kind of lead me and open that conversation up into other ways. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy a crankshaft and I'm gonna make a mold of it and maybe make like a ceramic piece. So I'm working on this like 4-part cast right now, which is like, I'll send you some pictures. So, but I can even take this apart because it's like,
is it ready?
yeah, it's ready. So yesterday I poured this plaster, which is like.
So this right here is a crankshaft from a car.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a inline 6 crankshaft from, I bought off of OfferUp from some guy in like the valley. He was like, "Oh, are you rebuilding an engine?" I was like,
"Not quite."
No. I'm like, "I'm making an artwork." He's like, "Oh,
okay,
cool. $50."
Is that the end of the questioning?
Yeah. So anyways, you can kind of see some of this thing. So like in pulling this stuff off, essentially what I do is I think about this object in quarters. So I build a wall across it and get this quarter here.
I see.
I'll take this off here and build up halfway here with clay, and I'll put aluminum foil in between so it's not plaster to plaster. So then when I pour plaster, it's not touching, and then it's like a, you know, here's the spout.
So this is only, so you're gonna,
I'll probably
this is
knock
like,
back some of this because that's always like, it's really, that line of that clay is really on the, right through the center of this object. And then right through the other, so it's like.
Okay, so this is only like, what you say was in quarters? Like you do a quarter at a time? This is only 1/4 of the mold.
Yeah, because, I mean, the more parts you have on a mold, the more difficult it is to make and the more chances for it to not work. But when you have an object that has what they call like undercuts, so like the thing I don't want to have happen is that I've embedded this into the plaster because there's a part that like is going in, I won't be able to pull it out. So you have to look at an object like from the perspective of like how, you know, like this. And now I'm giving like art, a little sculpture lesson, but like this I could do a 2-part cast of because I can draw a line, you know, right here all the way around the thing. I could build this up with clay, pour plaster down on top, flip it over, pull the clay off, put aluminum foil, pour the plaster on it, and then I've got a 2-part mold. I'd need a spout or somewhere to be able to pour whatever material I want, whether that be resin or clay or whatever. But so this is going to be a 4-part mold.
That's a really interesting concept because you were like, you got to get it out of the mold.
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff that I work on. Like, this may not make it into my like furniture collection, but this might go with that cabinet, or maybe it does. But it's kind of like in tune with what I'm working on that might somehow open up a door or a line of thinking that then informs maybe the work that I'm making. So it's kind of, it's also something that I can do like a half an hour at a time while I'm also like working on like this cabinet project right here. That's what this is. This is for like a residential built-in cabinet that I'm building. You know?
Is that like a Rest Fabrication job?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like what I have to have installed by mid-February in like 3 weeks. So, you know, this plus, this is not even close to being what it is. It's going to be like a wall of cabinets with like a desk that comes over here.
Cool.
So this is the stuff that like pays my rent, pays my bills, blah, blah, blah. But also I can be doing things that are getting my mind going, bringing me to that place with the Rest Energy work. And then I'm slotting in like the first week of March, last week, end of February, to actually make the first piece using this stuff. So it's kind of like working its way in, while mostly working on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, cool. And then I wanted to talk about, I got two more topics I think would be interesting, and then we'll transition into the wet wool collection.
Yeah.
One, I think, is music. You seem like you said that we were talking about like these flow states.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music in here? Are you silent? Like, is music an inspiration for you?
I wouldn't say it's an inspiration. I would say it's more of a like joy, or like something that brings me like comfort, and maybe not comfort, maybe makes me uncomfortable, whatever. You know, I listen to music all day long. I wouldn't say that I would directly look at like, or think about music through the visual or something.
Okay.
I've been listening to like, maybe I'm late to the game, but I've been listening to NTS radio a lot. Like
NTS?
It's
What's
like
that?
A digital radio
Okay.
station. They have a bunch of different DJs that have like shows.
Okay. I've never heard of that.
It's cool because each show has like a vibe based on whoever's the DJ, so you kind of know what you're getting. But I like getting like introduced to music that I've never heard or whatever. So I'll oftentimes be like, oh, what is this? And then I'll like screen grab like whatever song comes on, and then if I like that, then I'll like, after that show's over, then I'll like look up that album of that artist and listen to it. So I'm like always, it helps me like move through the day in a way, especially when I'm doing like work. It's nice to like
have something else. Yeah. So. You mentioned that the music you were making was, you said quiet and, what's the other word you used to describe it? Quiet and like,
I don't know. I mean, I was making music that is like, very like minimal, quiet music, like folk kind of ish inspired, sort of experimental. But I like everything. I listen to like, I really do generally like to listen to a variety of styles in music. Like I like to listen to classical music. I like to listen to jazz. I like soul. I like, you know.
Have you heard of Marconi Union?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Or How to Disappear Completely?
Oh, I don't know.
Isn't that a cool name?
Yeah.
I'm going to send you some links because I have a thing for like ambient music, especially when I'm working.
Yeah.
Like kind of ambient, and I'm really picky about what kind of ambient, because it can't be classical. It's like a piano. The piano is too much.
Yeah.
I need it to be like almost like meditation music.
Okay.
But I found a couple things that are cool that I'll send you.
I generally, if I'm like stressed out about what I'm doing, or like something's not working with the thing that I'm making, I'm like, I have to like, I'll just turn music off.
Yeah.
Or put on something chill. Like it definitely like, all right, I need to like wake up.
Okay.
I need to put on this type. You know, it's like it's like a prescription for what I need.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Okay, so I want to talk about this contradiction, because I feel like that theme came up a lot in your story and in some of your things. I think there was the name Rest Energy. Can you tell us about the name of your furniture, like your design practice?
Yeah.
Where that came from?
I was like pretty, I guess, I was interested to make a name for this practice so that I wouldn't have to like bear the or like be the like, it's kind of like a band name, you know? It's like I don't want to be just like, it opens up the door for possibilities in terms of like, maybe Rest Energy, maybe it's like Joe Schmo for Rest Energy, you know, or whatever, you know, like other designers. It like opens up the door for who knows what.
Yep.
And I like that. But the name itself came from when I was at PS1. I was talking about before in New York. Marina Abramovich had a artwork installed. She was like really blowing up. I mean, she's had a very long career, but she had a big moment in New York at that time. She did like a retrospective at MoMA. They had like performance work, blah 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 blah. So I was like introduced to her work, thinking about it. I was looking at a piece of hers that was called Rest Energy, and it's this photograph of a performance where like the two people, her and her partner, are like pulling a.
You might have to wait for a second. We got a forklift going by.
He's carrying
a true
he's
business
carrying
space.
It was like
What did he have?
It was like a little hitch, like a car hitch on his forklift. Just
Got it.
like driving it.
Okay, so you saw
So,
this piece called
I
Rest
saw
Energy.
this piece and Rest Energy. I thought the artwork was interesting. It was like her and her partner like leaning and holding a bow and arrow. So it was like this trust moment of like pulling apart, but like it's kind of interesting. It's whatever.
Okay.
But I liked the name. I thought it was kind of like you're saying, contradictive, but also like sort of confusing a little too. It's like Rest Energy.
It is a little bit,
you know, and I just kind of, just phonetically thought it was interesting. So I was like, oh, that could be a cool name for like, whatever. It's like almost like picking a band name. It's like, oh, you just pick it and then you just live with it.
Yeah.
That's what you are. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what it did. And yeah.
It's kind of like two opposing forces, like the rest, the energy is interesting.
Yeah. It's two opposing, and it's like also I think words like create imagery. They have a kind of like feel, and that's where the opposingness is. It's like a little bit of a contradiction.
Okay, I think that takes us to, let's talk about your first collection, Wet Wool, and which are a handful of the pieces are scattered around the shop here. So I'm gonna let you freeform. Tell us about this collection. Like, where did it start? Why? You're talking in the interview. You were talking about you were experimenting with materials and like tinkering with stuff, and then so what were you doing in that stage? What were the experimentation stage? Mm-hmm. Was this the concept, or like how did you get to this?
I guess it all sort of started again with like a discovery of like words and. Kind of like with the name Rest Energy, on a fabrication job. I made this pedestal for an art exhibition here in LA that was a small like artist-run space, and the show was called Wet Wool, and the work wasn't necessarily immediately tied to that title. I'm not even sure exactly why it was called that, but I thought that was interesting. I was like, Wet Wool, what is that? That's like kind of like seductive in some weird way, but it's also like this like weird thing, like wet wool. It's like it kind of feels weird, nice but weird to say, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. And so then I just started researching. And when I say research, I mean like Googling wet wool and learning about wool and like a little bit of its history and like how it's been used in the past. And I started reading about how when wool becomes wet, it actually becomes like warm. That's why you find it in like. It's why it's such
hiking
a magical.
socks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this like kind of almost mystical, natural organic fabric or material.
Because most fabrics are the opposite. Most fabrics are wet and cold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it also, if you like pull it or stretch it, it gets stronger. And I was like, that's kind of a cool like analogy. This thing that looks as though it's like in this like disaster, in this kind of like place of like usedness or kind of like not great, is actually an analogy for maybe it becoming stronger or doing the thing that it needs to do.
Yeah.
So I like that idea of something looking as though it's like a bit of a mess, but is actually kind of like living its best life.
That's really interesting.
So yeah, and so I started thinking about how can I represent that, and like how I felt like maybe making a chair would be the best thing to do first, like in terms of like this is my first like presentation of what my brand is, and like a chair felt very like I don't know, that's kind of like I feel like the chair is like the thing that you make,
the first step. Yeah. Okay.
So I was like, all right, I'll make one, and so I just started thinking about different ways to express it, and I came to this through like experimenting with resin and getting different materials, like getting different samples of wool and figuring out what I could do to also make it functional, but yet still sort of like sculptural. And
we got the forklift guy again. Let's see if we can get a look at him.
He's carrying like one little baby.
He has the little hitch on his thing, like a hitch for a trailer. Okay, continue.
So yes, so I landed on this sort of design where I've like, this is the same fabric. This wool is this upholstered piece. So there's like
Oh, cool.
this kind of like contradictive, like wet and dry, this
Very
kind
cool.
of like furry, almost like grossness, but
Yeah,
yet still
yeah.
like refined. This draping is like this, you know, you think that it's gonna move, but it's not.
Which is so
moving.
crazy.
You think that it's wet, but it's not. So it's like this like theater. There's a kind of like freezing of time. There's an implied movement, or like, but it's not. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of this is, but it isn't, built in through the whole piece.
Yeah, let's get some close looks. Like this, it's hard, it's like wet. Like it looks like it's dripping. And it's solid. I didn't know that this was the same wool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So the process, you get these, you experiment with different types of wool, types of resin, and then you just like, do you,
I'm gonna grab a thing. I'll show you.
forklift guys really putting us to work. We're getting some materials. We're gonna do a little experiment, it seems like. Yeah, so cool.
This was like one of my initial. So
Oh, this is like a little prototype then.
yeah, a little prototype sample
Okay.
that I made early on. This is like way too thick on the resin, but like I made a bunch of these. I saved this one.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
You know, just I made like different. I wanted to see like, you know, like what fabrics would work and which ones wouldn't. I made a piece that originally I thought maybe I'll move away from wool and I'll do like wet plastic and I'll make it look like a, you know, like I wrap everything in plastic. I have all this plastic. I was like, what if I could do some kind of thing that like was like plastic, and it was a plastic, you know, blah, it was a mess. But it was like, and oftentimes that's what's going on. Like this mold might be a mess and like really not work and be, like this dresser that I made is kind of a little bit of a mess, but like it's helping me like, it's putting me with the material, helping me learn about like what it does, how can I, you know, exploit the things that I like about working with this, like what's working, what's not. So it's just kind of like learning by doing is very much a part of my design process.
Yeah.
And having these frameworks of ideas to kind of guide, like with this wet wool, it's like the material, this kind of like locking into this, it is this, but it's also not this, the drama, the theater, like kind of using those as like guiding principles within the work, but then really figuring out how can I actually make this like look good or like, you know, work and like come together. So that takes some prototyping.
Yeah.
But it's like having like with this new line, I have this redwood burl. I've got these curved shapes. I'm going to be doing, I think, these like undulating kind of snake-like shelves
cool.
with this like burl veneer. And I have this terracotta clay that I might use, and I have other ideas. But I have like some material things figured out.
Okay.
And some like conceptual thoughts about what those materials mean together. But really the design and how it actually gets built is going to be figured out by the doing of it.
Yeah,
So,
that's how it goes. You gotta like,
Yeah.
you gotta just put shit into the world.
yeah.
You gotta like start trying stuff. So when you're making this stuff, is your intention that someone's gonna like use this at their dinner table or as in their living room? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's at first I thought it was kind of a thing that could go around a table, but they're actually quite heavy. The resin and the metal base, the steel, there's like a steel armature that it's like this one cloth is draped over,
Yeah.
and it's just absorbing so much resin that it's actually quite heavy. So it's not something that you can like pull in and out of. So it really
so
exists.
not a dinner table chair.
Yeah,
Unless
it's
you got
more
strong,
like-
strong guests.
Put it in the corner. And it definitely is something to be sat on and that you use.
Yeah.
But it's also as much, I think maybe as much like a sculpture or like something that exists in the room as
Yeah.
like a collected look, you know, a piece to talk about, to think about,
Yeah,
to live with.
Yeah.
As much as it is to sit on, it's both. So it's kind of like artwork and furniture.
So do you build the metal frames yourself?
Yeah. So
And then-
I weld up like I think I have. I won't get
Is there
it.
one
It's
in
like
the ceiling?
buried. There's like a buried one
Okay.
up there. But I build like a metal framework, and then this piece then is of fabric, and I figure out the proportions and how, you know, I want it to look
yeah.
and drape and just like be hovering just above the ground. And so then it's like this performative act of like drenching it and then draping this
Tossing
incredibly
it over.
messy thing on like
Yeah,
covered
you
in
covered in
shit.
resin?
Yeah. And then this is upholstered around a plywood form that I make. This I take to someone to have upholstered, and that's the
Okay.
only thing that I have somebody else do. And then, so then once this is still wet, I put this on here, and then I carefully come underneath and screw this plywood to this plywood,
Okay.
and it's locked in, and
Okay.
then that's it.
Cool.
These legs have like a blackened steel kind of finish to them, where I've dipped it in like a blackening agent.
Oh yeah.
And then it's got, I finish it with wax. So there's like a little bit of a natural, maybe a little rust that occurs over time, but it's a pretty like raw kind of, like, I'm not worried about like,
Yeah.
you know, it's, each piece is going to be like totally different, not
Yeah.
totally different, but a
Unique
little
in
bit
its own
different.
way. Yeah. So those are the chairs, and then you have these. Would you call them pedestals or tables? Or?
Yeah, they're like little pedestals. I mean, you can use them like a side table. These came after the chairs, because I was like, and I also have an entry console that's in a similar kind of vein. They kind of are like add-ons in a way, if I'm gonna be honest, to like feels like the work, and this is like, how else can I, you know, kind
Yeah.
of like make this into other things and fill a room with objects, you know? So it's like these pedestals are using some of the same, it's the same material as this wool. I've kind of cut out a space within this top for this resin to like pool up and create areas, and like they're kind of sculptural. They're kind of not usable, but usable.
Yeah.
You know, like I photographed these like sitting next to couches, and they could be used like a side table, where you could like put a plant on it, or like, you know,
Yeah.
put like your drink on it, I guess, if you wanted.
And then are those like, are there interchangeable bases?
Yeah, so then these are like,
You just pop it off there,
Yeah.
and you can swap
and
this
then-
out.
exactly, so you can like stack them up at different heights.
Oh yeah.
You could stack up the bases to create like kind of like a sculptural like
Whoa, cool.
piece, column piece, or like a side table. And yeah, these were made, I'll show you also, I don't know if you want some of this info or stuff, but I have like the mold for that.
Does this one have lemons in it?
That one's got lemons encased inside. That's buried.
That's pretty cool.
But essentially I stacked up like 5 pieces of MDF, and my next door neighbor has a CNC machine, so I hired him made a drawing for him so that it would interact with these columns, and we created these foots out of a CNC part, and from there I made a rubber mold of that, so then I could pour these pieces, which are resin and rubber, that brown one's rubber, and do different things. And tint them in different colors. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So this one is, that one's like, is that clear? Like kind of a clearish resin, or does that just have the lights hitting it?
This one might be the MDF. This is the MDF. So this is like the OG mother that then you can kind of see, like, I don't know if you can see the lines of the MDF. So then it was CNC cut. And then I made this rubber mold, like upside down like this. So I built a box like I did before for that. Made a mold of this, took this out, and then I had the negative space of that to then pour in. Yeah.
What does MDF mean?
MDF is like medium density fiberboard, but it's
Okay.
like, it's just like a cheap material that's easy to mill. Like
Okay.
this is MDF.
Okay, cool.
So it's good for, you can laminate onto. It's good for like substrates and like fabricating prototypes. It's a cheap material.
Got it, okay. Cool. Yeah, these are really fascinating. You can like build your own little base of different colored
Like feet.
feet.
But then they also act as like their own kind of
Very cool.
object.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Here's a stool version of that. I don't know if you
Oh
saw
yeah, let's
that.
check that out.
Anyways, that's. Wow. same idea that it kind of acts as like an ottoman, the same kind of like draping, but is its own like stool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Well, cool, man. Those were my couple of like topics I thought would be cool.
Yeah.
Anything we're missing that you want to show us? Like anything else you want to like show off? Your favorite tools or your little inspirational gadgets you got in here?
I mean, that's kind of it. I think that's like, yeah, that's it.
Cool.
All right.
Well, this is fascinating and beautiful, and
Yeah, this is crazy.
looking forward to seeing like what happens with this too.
This is like the same tree, so you can see that it's like the same. I don't know. I just think that's cool. It's like,
Yeah, very cool.
all right.
Well, thanks, man.
All right.
That was
Thank you.
very cool.